Good evening, I'm the Game Tutor, and tonight we're going to be looking at indie game Astray. Developed by Agon Games, a two-man development team from England, Astray is a horror puzzle game set in an abandoned museum. You've not heard from your uncle, the curator, in some time, so you journey to the museum to check on his well-being. In a start relatively reminiscent of Resident Evil, sees you entering the museum, exploring the various exhibits, solving puzzles and venturing deeper into the museum itself. Now in this review I'm going to try and keep everything as spoiler free as possible, as the game is much better played that way when you don't really know what to expect. Now Astray is obviously influenced by Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and there's also a bit of an old school Seventh Guest kind of vibe going on as you walk through the hallways of the Museum of the Supernatural. Graphically, Astray looks pretty good. Now there are a few times when the fogging seems to have been a bit overkill, but the different exhibits ranging from Atlantis to ancient Egypt all have a very distinctive feel and help suck you into the locations you're exploring. Now can I also say this is the best flashlight in games. It really just lights up the perfect right amount to be useful but also atmospheric without being a massive pain to use and a constant burden with the battery keep running out. Sure, the battery does run out, but it's really just the right amount and it actually really does bring the game up. Now where the game really excels is in its sound design. This game is more about atmosphere than jump scares, and the score, which is sometimes minimal in places, perfectly creates an amazing sense of tension. Your own character's heart rate and breathing is also used to great effect in the later portions of the game. Now this isn't Outlast scary, and it isn't trying to be, but let me assure you the game certainly unnerves you as you explore the museum's walls. Now there are a few times in the games where certain corridors can all start to look a little bit samey, but generally I always found myself being led down the correct path, and only once or twice did I need to reorientate myself. The puzzles in the games are a good mix of object quests, logic puzzles and number finders, and most of these play out pretty well, although I did manage to bypass a chunk of the game by essentially guessing a 3-digit puzzle. I simply had a dial with 3 digits, I started at 001 and just clicking through the dial I eventually got the right number, and it didn't actually take that long. Now the story in the game is told through documents found as you progress, but one positive aspect of this is often clues to solving the game's puzzles are found in the documents, which encourages you to read them. This meant that I actually followed the story, which could easily have been skipped without reason to read them, like in many other games that use this approach. Now Agon Games are only a two-man development studio, and there are a few places where things aren't quite perfect. Occasional object clipping bugs can sometimes be a bit of an issue, and there are a few locations which obviously have not had quite as much time spent on them as others, but for a relatively new indie team they've created an engaging world that's enjoyable to spend time in. It took me about 3 hours to complete Astray, but in that time I enjoyed everything I did and very happily overlooked the bits that were a little bit rough around the edges and got sucked into the game's indie charm. Now Astray is not going to be for everyone. It's a slower pace than many more of the recent scare games, and a relatively short running time will leave a few unfulfilled, but for a small price of $4.99 or your regional equivalent, I really enjoyed Astray and would recommend it to anyone looking for a horror game that's a little bit different. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and please also join up with us on Steam and our social media pages. Come visit us at www.thegametutor.co.uk, and also please come and be our patron on Patreon for a chance at cool prizes every month.